Welcome to another episode of Speaking with the Senator. And as you know, we're in the political season, and so we're inviting politicians to come on the show to share their point of view and some of the concerns that they might have and why they're running. And before I introduce my next guest, I'd like you to, if you don't mind, please hit the like button, please subscribe and share if you like the show. And if you don't like the show, do it because it helps us with our algorithms, and who knows, maybe someday you'll be on the show and you'd like people to see what you have to say. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Stephen Scaer coming on for the show.
Thank you.
And you're running for a Senate seat, District 13, which is Nashua.
Correct.
You're the other senator, hopefully, in the future.
Hopefully, yes.
Hopefully, yeah. So have you run before?
2 years ago.
2 years
Thank
ago,
you.
yeah. So never quit. Never quit. Just keep at it. So you're running again, and what's your main reason why you want to run?
Sure. Let's be realistic. I'm a dark horse.
Yeah.
And someone needed to step up and run. And what I've been working very hard at is informing people about the dangers done by pediatric sex trait modifications. Mm-hmm. Boys who like pink and don't play with their trucks are ending up getting chemically castrated with puberty blockers. Girls, teenage girls with anorexia and mental health problems are told that their problems will be solved if they just become boys. So they end up with irreversible changes from testosterone and mastectomies. And because of this ideology that doesn't make any sense, girls are losing their sports and their private spaces.
Right. Yeah, we've had a lot of discussion about this in the last term. Basically, like you just said, women losing their privacy in private spaces. Individuals that, if you have a disagreement with them on this whole topic, it's not as though they're disagreeable. They're just going to disagree kindly. They're going to shout you down, and you don't have a right to your own opinion if you disagree with the individuals who believe in all this stuff.
Sure.
As far, and there's almost a little type of bullying going on. I know that Beth Scaer was at the front of the line at one of our hearings. Yeah, I think you know her. And she was, when I say at the front of the lines, when we go into session, people come in with their posters, and they stand outside the Senate chambers and the House chambers, and sometimes it looks like a gauntlet that you have to walk through, and everybody's got their signs, and they want you to read their signs, and she wasn't exactly treated nicely, fairly, equitably. She was basically bullied, and she brought it to my attention, and I did speak up about it, and I made sure that that type of thing is not allowed in the Senate chambers or in the House. Everybody has a right. If you don't agree, that's fine, but be kind, be cordial, and be respectful, whether you're on one side of a topic or another side. And we try to do that, and we want to make sure that everybody's treated fairly.
We've actually been, as far as kind of bullying, we've each been assaulted, and in two of those cases we're pressing charges. One resulted in a conviction where a woman just tried to grab the phone out of Beth's hands. Yep. Another one, last Christmas, a woman, while I was in Colorado, then I decided to go out with some signs and talk to people, threw dog poop at me. And the ironically named peacekeepers over in June just surrounded Beth and just said horrible things about her, saying your husband's a coward, and using really foul language at her, just surrounding her. So that's part of the job. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's becoming more and more what's going on these days. If you have a disagreement with one particular side, that particular side is not as friendly and as equitable and loving as they say they are.
It has to be. They have to be, because the whole idea that the soul of a woman can occupy a man's body, or you're going to improve a girl's mental health by giving her testosterone, which is going to ruin her urinary system and her reproductive system and cause horrible, painful atrophy, and that's going to improve her mental health. These things are just ridiculous, and they can only exist with a whole lot of coercion.
Right. And one of the questions I've been asking, and nobody seems to have a good answer to it, but if somebody is suffering from gender dysphoria, how can you determine what a true gender dysphoria, which is a mental illness? It's described in a lot of the medical journals that that's a mental illness, and somebody who's legitimately trans. And that's a trick question because I don't believe somebody is legitimately trans. But if you're engaged in sports at school, and the boys want to get on the girls' team, and say, well, I feel like today I'm gender fluid. That's one of the things that I'm hearing these days is I'm gender fluid. What does that mean? And it is a tough topic. It's not popular. You're going to get shouted down. I know I'm going to get shouted down for bringing this up. But I can tell you that Democrats are whispering in my ear, thank you for speaking up. And before the show started, I mentioned that I said that at an event the other night. If you don't speak up, will you be heard? And the answer is no. And people are being forced to accept an ideology, almost a cult ideology of this gender fluidity and whatever is going on in our culture. And if you don't agree with them, then you're labeled a hatred. So you have to drop all your moral standards that you've been taught from generation to generation to generation, because of this new generation that says, hey, wait a minute, I disagree with you. And if you don't agree with me, well, then you're a hater. That's the essence of what we're dealing with. And people are saying, hey, you know what? Enough. I'm tired of this. I want my girls to be protected in sports. I don't want a man in the girls' bathroom that is suffering from a mental illness. And people are speaking up. I have to represent my district, District 12, and people want me to speak up, and I am. And it takes courage because you're in a really tough district. It's completely Democrat.
I'm glad you brought that up about Democrats, because I spend a lot of time in the streets. I go out with signs saying usually no child is born in the wrong body, or in another one, gender clinics harm children. And while I'm speaking there, the Democrats will come up and they'll talk to me. And because I'm a long shot candidate, I mean, I think last time I ran, I raised $2,000, and my opponent, Cindy Rosenwald, the incumbent, I think she raised somewhere around the neighborhood of $100,000.
Yeah,
so
sure.
If you're a Democrat, this is just a way for you to send a message, vote to me about everyone else about this issue. And if by some small miracle I got elected, the Democratic Party would get the lesson. They would get the message. And I think some people are getting the message, because Jonah Wheeler spoke out he spoke for a bill to protect children from genital surgeries, which are horrible. I don't know if they ever have happy endings, just horrible. Gender mutilation surgeries on genitals for minors. And the Democrats just pressed back really hard, insulted him, called him a traitor. He ended up winning the most votes in his primary.
I remember that.
Yeah.
It took a lot of courage for him to stand up, and I shook his hand, and I admire that. I admire that because, I don't have to be insane. If you're an independent thinker, you're not too much welcomed in the Democratic Party. And, some people that say, hey, you know what? I don't agree with that. That's refreshing. And you don't see it too much because it's a one line. You follow the line, and if you don't, you're a danger to the party.
Well, transgenderism, you said, was almost like a cult. I would argue that it is a cult with a very rigid, strict creed, tenets, and even a catechism that when you're out in the street, the people will just recite back, whether it's true or not. Like there's a 2%, only a 2% regret rate, and there's a 1% detransition rate. These numbers are all made up. You just feed people these numbers, and even at the top, they repeat these back. The experts at Dartmouth Health, for example, they quote studies saying that it's safe and evidence-based. And if you look back at their studies, it's like, what? This study doesn't say any such thing. But if you put a footnote on something, you cite a source, and then everyone buys into it. Since I was last here, one of the big biggest changes was the CAS review from England's National Health Service came out. And it was a 4-year review of all the evidence regarding puberty blockers and hormones, because they were seeing kids getting rushed into puberty blockers, and they were also saying half of them had autism. Almost everyone, I think they said 97%, had some other serious mental illness. They said, let's take a look at this. And they found out no sound evidence that these puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones work. And that's not just, it's Finland, Sweden, Norway, and the other also changed their policy. France set out strict warnings. But in the US, they're perfectly safe.
Yeah.
We're looking at the same data.
Yeah. It's interesting. What's your background? Are you a teacher or
Sure. I was a public school teacher and working at Pelham High for 27 years. I left that, and since then I've been doing some tutoring. I've also, a job that I really love is over in Hollis. I'm working with nonverbal or partially verbal adults, young men with multiple disabilities, and that's a whole lot of fun too. So all my life I've worked with. Well,
I actually seen you with an individual the other day. You were working with somebody.
Yeah.
You were. I believe we were walking down Mine Falls. One of my favorite places in Nashville. It's just a good place to meditate and walk and enjoy our Central Park, if you will. But
isn't it great that we can escape? We live in a city where we can just escape into the woods in just a few minutes.
Yeah, and it's beautiful, and there's also a community there. People walking their labradoodles, because I have a couple. But so that you're engaged and you're working with people, and you have a professional background. As far as there are some other topics though that are concerning. People are worried about income taxes, and they're worried about public education and versus school choice. What are your thoughts about school choice?
Well, first of all, regarding all of those things, if we live in a society where people already they can't say obvious truths, and people come to me, Republicans too, and they won't speak out against this transgenderism cult because they're afraid of repercussions at work, which they may well suffer, and that includes doctors too. And if someone can take your children away from you, if you don't pretend your daughter is your son, can take them away, or someone, and this can happen now, someone could take, if two parents disagree, one of them about whether a kid should get hormones. One parent can kidnap the kid, go to Maine, and Maine will protect them, and they'll trans the kid. So without that, I don't think we get anything right. Related to that, public school choice is really important, because public schools are dangerous ideologically for a lot of students to be, especially if young women with autism are especially vulnerable to this. So people need to have school choices. And one of the things you hear is, well, we shouldn't be funding religious schools. Right now, our public schools are religious schools. They with teaching a very strict doctrine that the soul of a girl can occupy the body of a boy, and that's the authentic self, and it's manifested through stereotypes.
That was a religion in the past. There was a goddess. I don't know if it was Diana or one of the others, but that was a practicing religion way back when, and where you can morph from one body to another to turn to a soldier. It's ancient history. It's like it's being recycled, and it's just kind of people are just taking a step back and saying, I don't know, this is a lot to take in. All of a sudden, how did all this happen? But school choice seems to be one of the things where people are starting to consider, because, well, the materials in the libraries.
Yeah, so and that's a funny thing, because you mentioned before. Right now, I've got a lawsuit against the city over flags. Some of those I was really surprised by. I thought
the pine tree flag were one.
Yeah, that was one. The other one was my detrans awareness flag, because I work with young, detransitioners, and actually by now I've one who's about to turn 40, because this has been going on long enough. And it's just respecting them and listening to the story. So that got taken out. But the Mayor Donchis would never describe that as a flag ban. If they refused to fly my flag, they wouldn't consider that a flag ban. But if a library refuses to carry pornography, then that's a book ban.
Yeah.
It seems like a little bit of a contradiction.
A school library in particular. Yeah. There's a lot of things that people are just trying to, they're scratching their head, and their culture is being assaulted on many different fronts. Mm-hmm. But just for a well-rounded as a candidate, I mean, we've got this portion covered as well.
Let me follow up to say one more thing about the schools. I'm really scared of sending schools based on this issue, based on the indoctrination. Aside from that, one of my daughters went to public school, into Nashua South, and she got a great education. I just want to see the public schools get their acts together regarding this. I'm not anti-public school, but now I want kids to be safe, and they may not be safe for all kids.
And the charter schools, I mean, they're a nice alternative. I mean, they're public charter schools. We have the Mac Society just up the street here, and that's a nice alternative for individuals if they don't want their kids going to the traditional public schools.
We have brilliant public schools around the area.
Yeah.
So you were about to ask me about some other issues.
Yeah, just real quickly, people are concerned about the inflation. They're concerned about local taxes. They're concerned about border security. What are your thoughts about all this?
Well, inflation, we can't do much about on this level, right?
Right, so we don't need an income tax to exacerbate that.
Sure, and we've done fine without. It's funny that whenever you have sales and income taxes, broad-based taxes, you'd expect, so they're taking so much more on of your income that they would use this money in the states with the high income taxes in the city, that they would just be utopias. There would be the new Jerusalem, happy places. I don't think either of us, when we go to high tax places, we see that everything better.
It doesn't seem to lower your property taxes either. Yeah.
And border security, that's important. And it's important to watch the northern border, but it's also trying to bail out your lifeboat with a tablespoon or something, given the flood across the southern border too. What I'm most concerned about locally, and I hear the most about, is the housing situation. Mm-hmm. And there isn't, whoever tells you there's going to be an easy solution, or a politician that says, I'm going to build houses. Politicians don't build houses. Why do they say that? I think I was hearing Joyce Craig bragging about how many houses she built, or how much housing she built. And we really put ourselves in a tough situation there. And I used to be, before I was a teacher, I was a newspaper reporter, so I'd go to these zoning meetings. And this was in the suburbs of Chicago, and then a little bit here. And people deliberately, and they talked about it openly, that we're going to have these minimum lot sizes. And the idea is we don't want we don't want these quarter-acre lots like we used to have, because it's going to bring in a lot of people, and these people are going to make a lot of babies, and the babies are going to go and they're going to flood your school district and all that. This is going to be a clever way to keep the riffraff out and not have kids. And then we're looking around now and say, where's the kids? What happened to them? We don't have them around anymore. Well, this was done very deliberately. And now people have solutions for that, or ways to ameliorate these, where the pushback from the communities has been tough. And I understand their perspective. They're worried about things that will undermine their property values. And here's what I bought into when I got this house. So there's no simple solutions. There's things you can do. Right.
There's not a silver bullet. And that's one of the things that I think I've drawn. But
my dad was from Brooklyn. This is something you have to be concerned about too when you talk about these things. And Brooklyn used to be a beautiful it used to be its own city, but beautiful little neighborhood. And New York needed housing, so they just smashed everything and built these huge housing projects that aren't safe, they aren't attractive, changed the whole characteristic about it. One concern that I have in the long run, if we don't solve our problem on this level, bad things could happen in the future.
Yeah.
Bad things are happening already, like the work that I'm doing now with people with disabilities, and also with people dealing with old people. The workers can't afford to come in to people we need to take care of us as we get old, or if we have kids with disabilities, that we've just priced them out.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you have a website?
I do. Stephen 4 New Hampshire.org.
Is anybody helping you out with your campaign?
Well, my wife is very involved, and she's helping me out a bit too.
And you're accepting help if somebody wants to get involved?
Yeah, I'd certainly appreciate some help, but I've got to figure out what to do next since I'm really talking about one issue, the best way to get it across. And I'm hoping to run some advertising just based on what's happening to children, to girls. So what I could use now, and I'm not unique in this, is some money. And this is, as I said, this is mostly a chance to educate people about how children and young people, young adults are getting irreversibly harmed.
You mentioned a young lady from Lowell. She was on Dr. Phil. What was her name?
Katie Anderson.
Katie Anderson. Maybe she can come on the show and talk about her experience with transing and detransing. So with that, we're running out of time. Stephen Scaer, you're running for State Senate, District 13, and that's the majority of Nashua. I get 3 of them, but I wish you the best, and thank you for the courage to speak up. And whether you agree with Stephen or not, somebody who has the courage to speak their mind is refreshing. So if you can show support, please help them out. And if you agree with them, please vote for them. And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you one more time, hit the like button and the share, because this will help people be more informed as to, when you go in the voting booth. So until next week, thanks for watching Speaking with the Senator.